Hello, and welcome back to another update where we continue where we left off with the newest developments throughout the front line in the Israeli-Palestinian war. We start out with some territorial changes where the Palestinians were pushed back in the southern parts of Gaza, where the Israeli forces managed to recapture the checkpoint between the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza here to the south of the border between Israel and Palestine. We also see some developments here on the eastern part of this area where the Palestinians are advancing in this direction, contesting the Israeli hold over the villages here to the south. And we also see some Israeli advances here to the north of these positions as they push the Palestinians back in direction of the Gaza Strip. So the Palestinian forces have been building up their forces and have been pushing in the direction of the Gaza Strip, trying to recapture all of the villages that the Palestinians managed to capture on the first 2 days. So there's been a lot of Israeli advancements over the past day, but on the second day we haven't seen that much compared to prior. And the reason for that is, first, we saw the Palestinians with their surprise attack managed to actually push a long distance, reaching the villages and cities of Oakim here in the central part and in the northern parts by Ashkelon and so on. So they reached areas far from the front line. So in these areas, the Palestinian forces were spread thinly across. But now, after a couple of days with breaches across the fence around the Gaza Strip, they've managed to concentrate a lot of forces in these small areas beyond the fences. And therefore it's much more difficult for the Israelis to push them back now compared to these distances that are much larger that they managed to take back on the second day. We are seeing similar things happening here to the northern parts as the Palestinians were first pushed back but then managed to again counterattack and contest these areas here to the northeast of the Gaza Strip. Fighting continues in the Sderot area as the Israelis try to push the Palestinians away from it completely. There's still Palestinian presence within the city, although it has largely diminished. There's still a few forces and reports of firefights throughout this morning. We also see reports here in the northern parts that the Israelis continue trying to push the Palestinians completely out of this area here by Ashkelon. However, there's still firefights here as well. And in an escalation compared to yesterday, there's also reports of firefights in two directions, both in the direction of Jerusalem here in the center, as well as in the direction of Ramallah, right to the north of Jerusalem. So these areas are largely populated by the Palestinians, but they hardly have any weapons compared to the Gaza Strip. So here there's much more manpower, but less equipment and weapons for the Palestinians. It is estimated that about 3 million Palestinians live in the West Bank, about 2 million in Gaza, and about 1 million throughout the territories of Israel. Some of the reported fighting in the direction of Jerusalem and Ramallah was recorded in this video here. I cannot authenticate this video because Israel and Palestine have a long history of fighting each other, and therefore some of these videos can be old, but I believe this is one of the newer ones from this war where fighting is taking place within the cities here in the West Bank, and the Palestinians are trying to establish some positions here, some resistance here on the Western Bank. Which brings us back to the reports of the hostages taken by the Hamas organization. When they first entered into Israeli territories, they managed to capture a whole bunch of civilians and Israeli soldiers and took them hostage back to Gaza. They then started negotiating with the Arab countries as intermediaries, mostly Egypt and the Gulf countries, trying to negotiate with the Israelis about a prisoner release by the Israeli government to the Gazas in return for the hostages. So all of the Israeli Palestinian prisoners for exchange for the Israeli prisoners taken by Gaza. However, So far that has yielded no results, so they are now negotiating for a 50-50 release all of the female prisoners in Israel in return for half of the prisoners taken by Gaza. So with this, there will be some sort of compromise. They will not be taking fighters from Israel, and in return, they can release the civilians that they have taken hostage, leaving only the soldiers behind. So this is a somewhat 50-50 compromise. So we will have to see if there's going to be any success with that. Meanwhile, with the military buildup of Israel, they are also doing a general mobilization of the reservists, and according to the latest reports from Israeli media, they are mobilizing 300,000 reservists. That is a major amount of soldiers. It is actually the most they've ever mobilized in their history, because they already have a standing army of approximately 200,000 soldiers. So with an additional 300,000 soldiers, that's about 500,000 soldiers. It is reported that they are mobilizing these for the ground offensive in Gaza, but most likely they will divert some of their forces to the north in the direction of Lebanon and Syria as well, just in case something happens there, and generally just as a reassurance that if any other countries participate in this war. And what do I mean by other countries participating in the war? There's always the possibility that other countries get involved, because historically the wars between Israel and Palestine have always included other countries, specifically Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, and other countries in the area, generally trying to stay on the Palestinian side. So this is a deterrence to these countries if they do decide to participate in the war. The Israelis have mobilized these forces to be ready for them, and if they do participate, then the Israelis are able to fight back. That is essentially the message they're sending with this, because 500,000 soldiers to fight Hamas, it is way overkill. Meanwhile, we see a lot of bombardments happening during this Israeli buildup in preparation for their ground offensive against Gaza, which will almost definitely happen at this point. So we're seeing a massive buildup of Israeli troops and equipment throughout the country, and we're seeing that during this whole time there's heavy bombardments of air bombs on the Gaza area, where we see multiple videos every day, every hour of these bombardments taking place across Gaza. We're also seeing massive missile strikes from Gaza towards the Israeli territories. We're seeing the Iron Dome system repelling most of these missiles at this point. However, they are still overwhelming due to the sheer amount of missiles being launched from Gaza, and that is why we see additional missiles still hitting the ground on Israeli territories. Meanwhile, there are reports from the Israeli Defense Forces that they managed to recapture all of the territories taken by the Palestinians so far. However, I'm waiting for further confirmation from my independent sources until I change the map. However, what we do see is that they have announced that they will do a complete blockade over all of Gaza by completely cutting off every single form of supply coming in and out of the area. This will be a complete blockade, including water, food, and humanitarian aid. I wonder how they will try to enforce it across the borderline, because the Egyptians can still cross through. But this will most likely be negotiated between the two countries, but most likely the Egyptians will still be able to move through, although there is this blockade, unless the Israelis physically stop the border, at which we can see border closure. But as you can see, the current situation is very dynamic, as a lot of things are happening day by day, and the situation is rapidly developing. But what we do see is that the Israelis are definitely planning on one major offensive to end this war once and for all. The question is, how will the surrounding countries respond, and how difficult will this ground operation be? I'll leave that for the next video, where I will analyze the defenses that the Hamas have prepared all throughout Gaza, the tunnels, the infrastructure, the weaknesses and strengths, and the difficulties that the Israeli army will face, and how long I will estimate this battle to take. All of this will be left for the next video. So thank you all for watching this one, and have a great day.